There is a specific kind of grief that nobody talks about. It is the grief of watching yourself abandon things you once loved. You walk past that guitar in the corner of your room, and something tightens in your chest. Not because you forgot about it, but because you remember exactly how it felt when you first picked it up. The electricity of possibility, the hours that disappeared like minutes, the absolute certainty that this was it. This was the thing that would finally make sense of you. You remember the weight of it in your hands that first week, how your fingertips ached as the calluses formed, how you would practice until your wrist cramped, until someone had to remind you to eat, until the light outside shifted from afternoon gold to evening blue, and you had not even noticed. You were inside something, a state of absorption so complete that time itself seemed to bend around it. Psychologists call this flow, but that clinical term does not capture the feeling. The feeling that you had finally found the thing that would organize all the scattered pieces of you into something coherent. And then, one day, without warning, without permission, your attention drifted. Maybe it was a podcast about astrophysics that made the universe suddenly seem more urgent than music. Maybe it was a sudden fascination with fermentation, with the invisible world of bacteria transforming cabbage into something alive and sharp and complex. Maybe it was film editing, the rhythm of cuts, the grammar of visual storytelling, or the mechanics of how bridges stay standing, the elegant mathematics of load and tension, and the way humans learned to make stone fly across empty space. And that guitar became a monument, a headstone in what feels like a graveyard of half-finished versions of yourself. You have a lot of headstones, don't you? The coding tutorials you started with such fire, convinced that programming was the literacy of the future, and you were going to be fluent. You made it through the basics. You built a few simple programs. You felt the rush of making a machine do exactly what you told it to do. And then the tutorial series got harder, or your attention found something else, and now those bookmarked lessons sit frozen in a browser tab you cannot bring yourself to close. Evidence, proof of another beginning without an end. The language learning app with its cheerful streak, counter frozen at 47 days. You remember those 47 days, the morning ritual of it, the small pride of watching that number climb, the fantasy of fluency, of walking through a foreign city and understanding the conversations flowing around you, of accessing a whole literature in its original syntax. You were so close to the point where it would start to stick, where the vocabulary would reach critical mass. And then you missed a day, and then another. And now the app sends you notifications you have learned to ignore, little guilt-inducing pings reminding you of who you were trying to become. The sketchbooks, with their first 10 pages filled with careful observation and their last 100 pages blank. The business plans that felt so viable at 2 a.m, mapping out revenue streams and target markets and the exact shape of the life you would build. The instruments and ingredients and equipment that promised transformation and now collect dust in closets and corners, each one a small archaeological site of a former self. Each one a small death, each one evidence of something you have been told is fundamentally wrong with you. Society has names for people like you: scattered, unfocused, flaky, commitment-phobic. They call you a dilettante, which sounds almost elegant until you realize it means someone who dabbles without commitment. Someone who cannot be trusted to finish what they start. Someone who lacks the mysterious quality that successful people seem to possess in abundance: grit, discipline, follow through, the ability to pick one lane and stay in it until something happens. You know the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. You have used it against yourself so many times, it has worn grooves into your self-concept. It comes up whenever someone asks what you do, and you fumble for an answer that does not sound like a list of failed experiments. It comes up when you compare yourself to people your age who seem to have figured it out. The ones with clear titles and linear careers, and the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly who they are. The ones who can answer the question, "What do you do?" without a 5-minute preamble about how it is complicated. The ones whose LinkedIn profiles tell a coherent story instead of looking like a random number generator spat out job titles. The ones who have been building toward something specific for years and now have the depth, the expertise, the authority that comes from sustained focus. You look at them and wonder what it must feel like. To want one thing, to pursue it with unwavering focus, to build something that compounds over years instead of starting over every time the wind changes. To have a clear answer when someone asks where you see yourself in 5 years. To not feel like an imposter in every new domain you enter because you have not put in the 10,000 hours that supposedly separate the amateur from the expert. And here is the part that really hurts. You have tried to be like them. You have forced yourself into specialization. You have picked the most practical thing, the thing with the clearest career trajectory, the thing that would make your parents stop asking worried questions about your future. And you committed to it with white-knuckled determination. You ignored the restlessness. You pushed through the boredom. You told yourself that everyone feels this way sometimes, that discipline means doing it even when you do not feel like it, that you just needed to be more mature, more focused, more willing to delay gratification. And maybe it worked for a while. Maybe you achieved some version of success by conventional measures. The promotion, the recognition, the salary that let you stop worrying about rent. But something inside you was slowly suffocating. Some essential part of your nature was being compressed into a shape it was never meant to hold. You would catch yourself staring out windows during meetings, your mind somewhere else entirely. You would feel a heaviness on Sunday evenings that had nothing to do with the work itself and everything to do with the prospect of another week of being only one thing. Because here is what nobody told you. Here is the truth that gets buried under all the productivity advice and career guidance and well-meaning suggestions to just focus. You do not have a discipline problem. You do not have a commitment problem. You do not have some fundamental character flaw that prevents you from being a real adult with a real direction. You have a nervous system that was built for something else entirely. If this perspective is starting to shift something for you, take a moment to hit subscribe so we can keep exploring these ideas together. Let me explain what I mean by that. For the last century or so, we have been living in what researchers call a kind learning environment. Think of it like golf. The rules are clear. The feedback is immediate. If you practice your swing for 10,000 hours, you get better. The hole is always the same distance. The ball always behaves according to physics. The relationship between effort and outcome is predictable. In a kind learning environment, specialization makes perfect sense. You dig one hole a mile deep and you win. This is the world that built our educational systems, our career advice, our entire framework for understanding success. It is a world where you pick a major in college and that major determines your career. And that career determines your identity for the next 40 years. It is a world where depth beats breadth every single time, where the specialist is king and the generalist is a footnote. But here is what your instincts already know, even if you have never had language for it. You do not live in a kind learning environment anymore. You live in what psychologists call a wicked environment. The rules change constantly. The feedback is delayed or misleading. The skills that mattered yesterday become obsolete tomorrow. The relationship between effort and outcome is chaotic. You can do everything right and still fail because the landscape shifted underneath you. In a wicked environment, the specialist is not strong. The specialist is fragile. They have put all their eggs in one basket, and they are hoping desperately that no one tips it over. They have spent years developing expertise that might be worthless in 5 years. They have built an identity around a skill set that the market might stop valuing. And when the change comes, and it always comes, they are the ones who panic. They are the ones who do not know how to pivot because they have only ever known one direction. Your brain knows this, not consciously, not in ways you can articulate at dinner parties, but somewhere deep in your nervous system, there is an ancient intelligence that understands something about survival that modern career advice has forgotten. In uncertain terrain, the generalist lives. The one who can adapt, who can pivot, who has gathered tools from a dozen different domains. They are the ones who make it through when the landscape shifts. This is why you cannot stay still. This is why your attention moves. Not because you are broken, but because you are responding to signals that specialists cannot hear. Your nervous system is picking up on the volatility, the uncertainty, the rapid pace of change that defines this particular moment in history. And it is doing exactly what nervous systems are supposed to do. It is preparing you. It is making you adaptable. It is refusing to let you become so specialized that you cannot change when change becomes necessary. There is a concept in cognitive science called far transfer. It describes the ability to take knowledge from one domain and apply it to a completely unrelated domain. Most people operate on near transfer. They solve problems they have seen before using tools they already know. If you are a carpenter and you encounter a new kind of joint, you solve it using carpentry knowledge. That is near transfer. Useful, but limited. But far transfer is different. Far transfer is where innovation lives. It is the ability to see connections that specialists miss because specialists are too deep in their own territory to look up. It is taking a principle from biology and applying it to architecture, taking a technique from jazz improvisation and applying it to software development, taking an insight from linguistics and applying it to user interface design. This is not some abstract theoretical concept. This is how actual breakthroughs happen. This is how new fields get created. This is how impossible problems get solved. Someone with a foot in two worlds sees something that people who live in only one world cannot see. Think about the most creative breakthroughs in history. They almost always came from people who crossed boundaries. Darwin was a geologist before he was a biologist. His understanding of deep time, of the slow accumulation of tiny changes over incomprehensible spans, came from studying rock layers, not animals. That geological perspective is what allowed him to see evolution when other naturalists were staring at the same finches and seeing nothing but variation. Einstein worked in a patent office reviewing mechanical inventions while he reimagined the nature of space and time. He was not in an academic environment. He was not surrounded by other physicists. He was spending his days thinking about trains and clocks and the synchronization of distant events. And that practical, mechanical thinking fed directly into the thought experiments that became special relativity. Steve Jobs famously credited his calligraphy classes with shaping the aesthetic sensibility that made Apple products feel different. He dropped out of college but kept auditing classes that interested him. He learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the space between letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. And years later, when he was designing the Macintosh, that knowledge became the reason Apple computers had beautiful fonts when everyone else's computers had ugly ones. A seemingly useless class in an unrelated field became a competitive advantage. These were not specialists. They were synthesizers. They gathered fragments from disparate worlds and assembled them into something new. And here is the uncomfortable truth that the specialization gospel does not want you to know. You cannot train this. You cannot develop far transfer by going deeper into one field. You can only develop it by going wider, by being exactly the kind of person you have been told is wasting their potential. Every time you followed your curiosity into a new domain, you were not abandoning your path. You were adding another instrument to your orchestra. You were learning a new language that would one day allow you to translate between worlds that do not usually speak to each other. You were building the cognitive infrastructure for connections that have not happened yet. That guitar in the corner, it taught you something about practice and patience and the relationship between repetition and emergence. It taught you that complex skills are built from simple movements, repeated until they become automatic. It taught you how to hear the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and how to close that gap incrementally. It taught you about muscle memory, about the way the body learns differently than the mind, about the strange alchemy that happens when conscious effort becomes unconscious flow. The coding tutorials taught you something about logic and systems and the way complex behaviors arise from simple rules. They taught you to think in loops and conditionals, to break big problems into smaller problems, to debug by isolating variables. They taught you that computers are perfectly literal, that they do exactly what you tell them to do, which means if something is not working, the problem is in your instructions, not in their execution. That is a way of thinking, a cognitive tool, And it applies to far more than programming. The sudden obsession with astronomy taught you something about scale and perspective and your place in incomprehensible vastness. It taught you that the light you are seeing from distant stars is ancient, that you are looking backward in time, that the universe is expanding, and everything is moving away from everything else. It taught you that the elements in your body were forged in the hearts of dying stars, that you are literally made of stardust. That does something to a person. It shifts something about what feels important and what feels trivial. None of it was wasted. All of it is still in you, waiting to be synthesized into something that does not exist yet. But I want to pause here, because understanding that your curiosity is a superpower does not immediately solve the problem you are living with every day. The exhaustion, the shame, the feeling of being perpetually behind while everyone else seems to be building something that compounds. The question that wakes you up at 3 in the morning, asking what exactly you have to show for all these years of scattered effort. I am curious, when did you first realize you were wired this way? Was there a specific moment when you understood that your mind impulsively would not stay in one lane? Let me know in the comments. You see people your age with clear trajectories, senior positions, published books, established practices. They have been doing one thing for a decade, and they have the depth to show for it. They are the go-to person for their specific thing. They get invited to speak. They get asked for their opinion. They have built a reputation that opens doors. You look at your own path, and it looks like a scribble. A child's drawing compared to their clean lines, and no amount of reframing can completely erase that comparison. The world rewards visible progress. It rewards the ability to point to something and say, I built that. And what do you point to? A resume that looks confused, a collection of half-developed skills, a mind full of knowledge that does not fit into any standard category. You cannot put synthesizer on a job application. You cannot monetize file transfer until the synthesis actually happens. And in the meantime, you are just the person who cannot seem to stick with anything. So let me offer you something more practical, a way of understanding the geometry of your own potential that might actually help you navigate this. There is a model in career development called the T-shaped professional. The idea is that you have broad general knowledge across many areas, represented by the horizontal bar of the T, and deep expertise in one specific area, represented by the vertical bar. This model has been held up as the ideal for decades. Be curious about everything, but master one thing. Have enough breadth to communicate across disciplines, but enough depth to be truly valuable in your specialty. But you are not T-shaped. You never were. You are what some researchers call M-shaped, or comb-shaped, or what I think of as constellation-shaped. Multiple pillars of depth connected by bridges of curiosity. You do not have one specialty, you have several, and they are all connected by the unique way your mind moves between them. The problem is that you cannot build all the pillars of the M at the same time. This is where people like you collapse. You try to learn data science and write a novel and start a business and master a new instrument all in the same month. You spread yourself so thin that nothing gets built. And then you feel like you have proven everyone right. You really cannot commit. You really are too scattered. But here is what the successful polymaths understand. The ones who actually built something with their wide-ranging minds. They practiced what we might call serial mastery. They viewed their lives in seasons. They gave themselves permission to be obsessed with one thing for a period of time, knowing that the season would end and another would begin. This is not abandonment. This is completion. You finished the season. You harvested what that field had to offer, and then you moved to the next field, carrying the nutrients with you. The mistake is thinking you have to choose forever, that picking something means marrying it until death do you part. But your relationship with your interests is not a marriage. It is more like a series of deep friendships. Some last for years. Some last for months. All of them change you. All of them leave deposits in your soil. I want to tell you about a pattern I have observed in people who have made peace with this way of being. They stopped trying to merge everything at once. They let their different interests exist in different containers. Maybe their day job is one pillar, the thing that pays the bills and provides stability. And their evenings and weekends are where the other pillars get built. Not frantically, not with the pressure of monetization, but with the patience of someone who knows they are playing a longer game than most people can see. They protected their energy. They said no to opportunities that would have consumed them completely, even prestigious ones, because they understood that their creative ecosystem needed breathing room. They needed slack in the system, space for the unexpected connection to emerge, space to follow a new curiosity without guilt, space to let ideas compost in the dark. And eventually, often after years, the pillars started to touch. The thing they learned in one domain became exactly what was needed in another. The skills that seemed unrelated revealed themselves as different angles on the same underlying pattern. The synthesis happened, not because they forced it, but because they trusted the process long enough for it to unfold. This is the part that requires faith, because you cannot see the synthesis from where you are standing. You can only see the scattered pieces. You can only see the graveyard. And faith is believing that those pieces are not random, that they are being gathered for a purpose you cannot yet perceive. What would change for you if you truly believed that none of it was wasted? That every abandoned project was actually preparation? I would love to hear what comes up for you. There is another lens through which to understand your nature. It comes from evolutionary biology, and it is called redundancy. In engineering, redundancy is often seen as waste. Why have two systems that do the same thing when one would be more efficient? Why build backup systems when you could just make the primary system more robust? In a stable environment, this logic makes sense. Redundancy is expensive. It requires extra resources. It is inefficient. But in nature, redundancy is one of the primary strategies for survival. Elephants rarely get cancer, and for decades, scientists could not figure out why. Mammals their size should have much higher cancer rates based on the sheer number of cells they have. More cells means more opportunities for something to go wrong. But elephants have evolved something clever. They have multiple copies of a crucial tumor-suppressing gene. If one copy fails, another takes over. The redundancy is not waste. It is insurance against an uncertain future. Your scattered interests are your redundancy. Every skill you have acquired, even the ones you never mastered, is another copy of a survival gene. If you were only a software engineer, an artificial intelligence made your specific skills obsolete, you would be terrified. Your entire identity and livelihood would be threatened. You would be one of those people scrambling to retrain in your 40s, competing with younger people who have more energy and fewer obligations. But if you are a software engineer who also understands electrical systems and has taught yourself enough about teaching to run workshops and knows how to grow food and can write with some competence and has dabbled in a dozen other domains, you are not fragile. You are anti-fragile. You actually get stronger when things change because you have more options than anyone around you. This is not a comforting story you tell yourself. This is strategic adaptability. This is exactly what uncertain environments reward. And the uncertainty is not going away. If anything, the rate of change is accelerating. The specialists who look so secure right now are standing on ground that could shift at any moment. You have been building a raft while they have been building a house. And when the flood comes, and the flood always comes eventually, you will be the one who floats. But I want to go deeper than strategy, because this is not just about career resilience. This is about something more fundamental. This is about who you are and whether you have permission to be that person. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes from trying to be someone you are not. It is different from the suffering of external hardship. It is quieter, more insidious. It is the suffering of self-betrayal, of forcing yourself into shapes that do not fit because you have been told those are the only acceptable shapes. You have probably experienced this. The job that looked perfect on paper but slowly drained something essential from you. The relationship where you performed a version of yourself that was more palatable but less true. The years you spent trying to want what you were supposed to want, wondering why success felt so hollow when you achieved it. This is what happens when you try to specialize against your nature. You might succeed by external measures. You might build the career and accumulate the credentials and earn the respect of people who value those things. But something inside you will be dying. Some essential spark will be slowly extinguished, and you will find yourself in your 40s or 50s, having achieved everything you were supposed to achieve, feeling emptier than you did when you started. I am not saying specialization is wrong for everyone. For some people, it is exactly right. They genuinely want to go deep into one thing. They find fulfillment in mastery. They are not suppressing their nature. They are expressing it. But you are not that person, and pretending to be is a form of violence against yourself. So here is the permission I want to give you. Even though you do not need permission from me or anyone else, you are allowed to be multiple things. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to have a path that looks like a scribble instead of a straight line. You are allowed to follow your curiosity even when it leads you away from what you were just doing. You are allowed to trust your own nervous system more than you trust the advice of people who have never lived inside your particular mind. This does not mean you abandon all discipline. It does not mean you flit from thing to thing without ever building anything. It means you learn to work with your nature instead of against it. You learn the rhythm of your own seasons. You learn when to push and when to let go. You learn that completion does not always look like finishing. Sometimes completion looks like harvesting what a field has to offer and moving on before the soil is depleted. There is a kind of wisdom in your restlessness. It knows things your conscious mind does not. It knows when you have learned what you came to learn. It knows when a path has stopped growing you. It knows when it is time to move, even if you cannot justify the movement with logic. Learning to trust that wisdom is one of the great tasks of your life. Not blind trust, not impulsive trust, but the deep trust that comes from paying attention to your own patterns over time, from noticing what happens when you force yourself to stay past the season's end, from noticing what happens when you give yourself permission to follow the next fascination. You will get better at this. You will learn to distinguish between the restlessness that signals genuine completion and the restlessness that is just fear of depth. You will learn when to push through resistance and when to honor the signal that this particular path has given you what it had to give. This is not a skill anyone can teach you. It is a skill you develop through years of paying attention to yourself. And here is something else I want you to understand. The things you have abandoned are not lost. They are composting. They are breaking down into nutrients that will feed whatever you grow next. Every skill you developed, even the ones you never mastered. Every perspective you gained, even from the projects you never finished. Every hour you spent in fascinated attention, even if the fascination faded, all of it is still in you. All of it is contributing to the unique cognitive architecture that only you possess. You are not a graveyard. You are a garden with many seasons, and gardens do not look productive in winter. They look dead. But underground, in the darkness where no one can see, roots are spreading. Nutrients are cycling. The soil is being prepared for growth that has not happened yet. This is where faith comes in again, because you cannot see the underground work. You can only see the surface, and the surface looks barren. You can only compare yourself to the specialists who seem to be in permanent summer, always producing, always visible. But their way is not your way, and your way is not inferior. It is just different. It operates on different timescales. It produces different kinds of fruit. The world needs specialists. It needs people who go deep. But it also needs synthesizers. It needs people who can see across boundaries. It needs people who speak multiple languages and can translate between tribes that have forgotten how to talk to each other. It needs people who can take an idea from biology and apply it to economics, who can take a technique from music and apply it to management, who can see patterns that specialists miss because specialists are too close to their own territory. You are one of those people. You have been one of those people your whole life. And the shame you feel is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence of the mismatch between your nature and the story you were told about how success is supposed to work. If something in this resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone else who has a graveyard of hobbies they feel ashamed of. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is language for an experience someone thought they were alone in carrying. So let me offer you a different story. A story where your scattered path is not a bug, but a feature. A story where your inability to pick one thing is not a weakness, but a strength you have not yet learned to wield. A story where all those abandoned projects were not failures, but semesters in a university of your own design, each one teaching you something you will need later, each one adding another thread to the tapestry you are weaving. In this story, you are not behind. You are on a different track entirely. A track that takes longer to show results, but produces something the straight-line people cannot produce. You are not scattered. You are comprehensive. You are not unfocused. You are panoramic. You are not a dilettante. You are a polymath in training, gathering the raw materials for a synthesis that has not happened yet. And here is the final thing I want to leave you with. The synthesis will happen, not on your timeline, not when you demand it, but it will happen. One day, you will be working on something and you will suddenly need exactly the skill you developed in that abandoned project from years ago. One day, you will see a connection that no specialist could see because you have stood in territories they have never visited. One day, all those scattered pieces will click into place, and you will understand why you had to gather them. You cannot force this. You cannot rush it. You can only keep gathering. Keep following your curiosity. Keep trusting that the path that looks like chaos from the inside looks like preparation from above. You were never meant to be just one thing. You were built to be a bridge between worlds. And bridges take longer to build than buildings. They require foundations on multiple shores. They require understanding of territories that do not usually speak to each other. But when they are complete, they allow movement that was previously impossible. They connect what was separated. They make new things possible. That is what you are building. That is what all those scattered interests have been preparing you for. Not a career, not a specialty, but a capacity. A capacity to move between worlds, a capacity to translate, a capacity to synthesize, a capacity that the world needs more than it knows. So stop apologizing for your graveyard of hobbies. Those were not failures. They were semesters. Stop beating yourself up for your inability to specialize. That inability is protecting you from fragility. Stop comparing yourself to the straight-line people. You are not on their track. You are on your own track, and it leads somewhere they cannot go. You are not broken. You are not scattered. You are not behind. You are exactly what a wicked world needs. A mind that refuses to shrink. A curiosity that refuses to be contained. A person who is preparing for a future that specialists cannot even see. If this helped you feel less alone in your particular kind of chaos, I hope you will stay. There is more to explore together, more hidden patterns to uncover, more language for experiences that usually go unnamed. And if you feel comfortable, share your story in the comments. Tell me about your graveyard. Tell me about your seasons. Because somewhere out there, someone is scrolling through, feeling like the only person in the world who cannot just pick one thing. And your words might be exactly what they need to feel a little less broken. Thank you for watching.